We left Fresno on a real rainy afternoon, got to Venice at night, and our family moved to Electric Avenue near right behind Abercrombie and 4th Avenue. And it was this old building, and it was a tenement kind of apartment with the Murphy bed. And my parents were still asleep, and I woke up in the morning in my pajamas to step out, and it was like somebody had hit like the light switch. The sky was so blue, and there was all this beautiful vegetation around me, and I had never seen bougainvillea before. And in the patio of the building, in between the landlady's house and the building, was this huge patio, and it had every color of bougainvillea that was like 2 stories tall. And it was like the technicolors, it was like, oh my God, all this color. And I instinctively knew that I was where I was supposed to be.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, Castle Heights edition. Today we talk with Lindsey Haley. Lindsey is a mom, a grandma, a poet, a playwright, and she grew up in Venice and then escaped to Fresno with her lowrider boyfriend at 14 years old. Remember that episode we did just a few weeks ago with the florist in South Robertson who met her husband at 13? This is her mother. So, we're going to talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Venice, and also Boyle Heights, and what it was like to be a teenage mom picking in the sweltering, hot onion fields of Fresno. So get ready, people, for Lindsey Haley. Hey. Hey, everybody. I am here in Castle Heights with Lindsey Haley.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am fantastic. First of all, thank you for having me in your home. Your very colorful, artistic home.
Thank you.
I'm also excited to be in Castle Heights because this is a neighborhood I never knew about.
I didn't know about it either until my daughter moved out here.
Do you want to describe where Castle Heights is?
Castle Heights is kind of a weird little turn, but I guess National and Robertson, just kind of south of that.
Is this a Ralph's or a Vaughn's over here?
It's a Vaughn's, and that's on National. It's like maybe east of Palms, where Palms turns into National Boulevard.
So we're kind of close to Culver City. Mm-hmm. We're close to your daughter, Brooke, on South Robertson.
South Robertson. And I guess that's also maybe considered part of Castle Heights, Beverly Wood area.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Just a little bit north of the 10.
Yes.
Conveniently located to the 10.
Very conveniently located to the 10.
How long have you lived here?
I've lived here 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And before that, I lived in Inglewood for 20 years. And prior to that, I lived in Venice.
Where did you live in Inglewood?
I lived in Inglewood, like on Florence and Centinela, right before Centinela ends, close to the park.
Mm-hmm.
So,
did you like living in Inglewood?
I loved living in Inglewood. I actually nicknamed it Venice Numero Dos, Venice number 2, because all of my neighbors were either from Venice or Santa Monica or West LA.
You're friendly with Mike Bravo from Venice.
Yes.
And his family.
Yeah.
He talks about gentrification all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Was the movement from Venice and Santa Monica to Inglewood, were you guys being forced out? Did they raise the rents on you? What was the exodus all about?
I would say that the exodus actually began when my generation started purchasing homes, when they got married. And I would say as early as 77, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my generation got married really young. Um, and like out of high school soon thereafter. And they either bought in Inglewood or in the valley.
Because it was cheaper than
It
in
was
Venice.
less expensive.
Even then, it was
Hmm.
expensive to buy a house in Venice.
Well, the prices of homes and the gentrification actually started. It was a slow at that time, but I would say as early as 76, 77.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in my mom's apartment carport in the alley and seeing a Rolls Royce drive through the alley.
In Venice.
Uh-huh. And we kind of looked at each other, my friends and I that were hanging out down there, and we said, well, there goes the neighborhood. And Dennis Hopper lived on Indiana and 4th, I think. And then Tim Robbins also lived there. And kind of like your fringy artists.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought, okay, it's coming quick. And it didn't happen that quick.
Right.
So in 77, the houses were actually, it was getting expensive. And also, too, is that I think at that time it was a lot of violence. The schools weren't very good. And so people wanted quieter neighborhoods and more suburban living. And Inglewood provided that.
Mm-hmm. What was the demographics of Inglewood when you moved there?
When I lived there, I would say uh, I don't have the percentages, but I would say largely Black and Latino. In fact, when I moved here 5 years ago, I moved in around January or February, and the following Christmas or that Christmas, I had my places in Inglewood where I bought all my masa and the hojas and the chiles and everything in Inglewood. And so I went out there to Lenox to buy my masa at the carniceria that I always go to, or panaderia, and then go to my market, buy low, and then I knew where my 99-cent store was and my nail salon. And so I ended up spending the whole day in Inglewood. And it wasn't until I was in the nail salon at about maybe 5, 4 in the afternoon that I realized I had not seen a white person all day.
Interesting.
Yeah. And here, there was an emergency where I needed a can of hominy for menudo or pozole that we were making. And I needed some extra lard for the masa. And I went to my Vons right here on National Boulevard and found out that they do not sell lard and they do not sell hominy. So for some of my purchases, I have to go outside of my neighborhood.
Well, we're gonna fix that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also interesting for people to know that Inglewood wasn't always black.
No.
Because I think that's what people think about South LA is that there's black pockets and Latino pockets, but the secret is Latinos have always been here, and have often lived in harmony with black people, and
That was certainly the case in Venice. They didn't call it Oakwood then. I mean, Venice was just Venice, but in the neighborhood that I lived in, which is now recognized as Oakwood, it's large. Back then, it was largely black and brown,
mm-hmm.
and you had your white families living there too, but everyone was lower income.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had your hippies, which was really wonderful.
Is that what I'm seeing on these walls? Is this an influence of growing up in Venice during that hippie time?
Absolutely. Well, I would say that the majority of my walls are covered by Chicano artists
Mm-hmm.
and gifts that I've received from them very generously, and some pieces that I have purchased. But growing up in Venice, it was not uncommon to walk home from school and see an artist working in their garage and stopping and talking to the artist for an hour or two. So I saw working artists.
Mm-hmm.
And on Sunset and Fifth, there was a large complex that where they rented out space to artists who work with pottery.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brothers and sisters would go there, and they would let them play with clay and, you know, burn their pieces and walk home with a clumpy ashtray or something. And so it wasn't uncommon to be surrounded by the arts then.
I think that you are a great person to be talking to today
Well,
for
thank you.
many, many reasons. One of them is you raised a family in Venice, which I think a lot of people who are outsiders of LA would be afraid to do, because Venice, especially in the 70s and 80s, had a reputation of having a lot of gangs, being a little rough around the edges, along with these hippie people, which some parents may not want their kids while talking to artists in their garage.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
What was your experience raising a family in Venice back then?
Well, let me back up a little bit in that I moved away from Venice in 73. I ran away with the lowrider next door. That's how I put it. Michael and Brooke's dad was from Fresno.
Do you remember what kind of lowrider car he had?
Absolutely. Of course I do. It was a 65. And when you know,
65 Chevy?
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
65 Chevy, Impala,
Yes.
Super Sport, with the bucket seats.
Okay, now they tell us today women are not impressed by cars. Were you impressed by this car?
Hell yeah. you know? He'd been living with his sister. He came down from Fresno, and his sister actually lived 2 doors down.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew the family, and my mom had babysat his cousins or nieces and nephews. And so we knew the family. And Mike had been living there for several months, and I didn't notice him until he got to 65.
Oh, my God.
And I said, "Who's that guy?
It
I'll
worked.
make him my boyfriend."
Really?
Well, he
How
was
old
so
were you?
handsome.
How old were you at this
I
point?
was 14.
14.
Mm-hmm. And Mike was 17.
Uh-huh.
And he was just absolutely gorgeous.
You know what? This reminds me of Brooke and her husband.
Yeah.
What was she, 14 or 13 when she met him at first?
I think she was 14, and I think they started dating when she was 16.
And the age difference didn't bother you because you had done this.
No. And then I wasn't your regular 14. I mean, I like to say that by the time I was 12, growing up in Venice, I'd seen everything.
Yes.
I'd seen everything, good and bad.
You were born in Texas, right?
El Paso.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you saw?
In 1969, my family moved to Venice from El Paso. And I remember that first morning waking up. We had a pit stop for a few months in Fresno. And Fresno in the winter is stark and cold and gray. And we left Fresno on a real rainy afternoon, got to Venice at night, and our family moved to Electric Avenue right behind Abercrombie and 4th Avenue. And it was this old building, and it was a tenement kind of apartment with a Murphy bed. And my parents were still asleep, and I woke up in the morning in my pajamas to step out, and it was like somebody had hit like the light switch. The sky was so blue, and there was all this beautiful vegetation around me, and I had never seen bougainvillea before. And in the patio of the building, in between the landlady's house and the building, was this huge patio, and it had every color of bougainvillea that was like 2 stories tall. And it was like the technicolors, it was like, oh my God, all this color. And I instinctively knew that I was where I was supposed to be. And I was 9.
Mm.
And so I loved it. I mean, I couldn't wait to see hippies because I'd only seen them like on the Beverly Hills, hillbillies. They
Yeah.
had an episode. And so I couldn't wait to see hippies with their beads and all of that. So, and the beach at that time was pretty deserted.
Really?
Yep.
So it was
Most of
all
the
yours.
yeah, most of the storefronts that you see now were apartments.
Huh.
Yeah, or little shops, or
So you watched the Venice boardwalk develop and
yeah,
bloom.
yeah. I mean, that's when like about 76, 77, what roller skating craze kind of started.
Yeah.
And then you saw vendors, and then those storefronts that were apartments that were like communal living for a lot of hippies, just became, selling T-shirts and crap and stuff. And our attraction was, let's go see the weirdos in Venice Beach.
Nothing's changed.
No, it's like, they don't come to see our architecture or love our music. It's like, let's go see the weirdos at Venice Beach.
Is it good for children to be around weirdos?
It was for me. The school that I was enrolled in was Westminster, which is right on Abercrombie. The back of our playground and the fence faced what's now a dog park. They let us out for recess, and this band is playing music, and these hippies are starting to gather in. It was 11, and they started playing Led Zeppelin's A Whole Lot of Love, and that went on forever. And so we come out for lunch, and now the crowd is huge. And all us kids are like looking out the fence up at the hippies having their lovin'. And then people start taking off their clothes. Yeah. So, yeah, and I was 10, and what I think one of the most unfortunate things I saw during that time too was people who had overdosed and being pulled out of out of their apartments on a stretcher. I'd never seen that before.
What drugs had they overdosed on?
Heroin.
There was heroin back then.
Oh, yeah.
In Venice.
Yeah, yeah,
That is unfortunate.
yeah. We would walk from Venice Beach to the pier all the time.
Which pier?
Santa Monica.
Was Santa Monica Pier full of amusements and stuff like that?
No amusements. They had the what is it? The arcade.
Yeah.
There, and the carousel was there.
So the carousel and like pinball machines at the
Yeah.
arcade.
Yeah.
And like
Food
skee-ball.
vendors and food vendors. They had an ice cream place that we liked.
I gotta say, this sounds like an idyllic childhood.
Yeah, but it was scrappy. My mother had an aunt that had lived in Venice, and she remembers coming out as a teenager when she was 16 and loving it, and having gone to POP, Pacific Ocean Park. And she would tell us these stories about the roller coaster and how they had this tank of mermaids. And so POP had closed the summer before. And so here we are on this trip down, oceanfront walk, and she's pointing things out, and it's all closed. And it just looks really scary, and she goes, that's the restaurant, the fancy restaurant, and it's all boarded up. And then we got down to Main Street to like a little gift shop. And there was just this lady smoking behind the counter, looking really just ugh. And all of Main Street smelled like a big bar, like cigarettes and stale beer.
Yeah.
And so we go into this gift shop, and the postcards were bent. They were so old and dusty. And I thought to myself, where did my mother bring me to? So it was dusty. It was, by this time, I guess better places had nicer piers. I don't know. But, I worked with a woman who grew up in Mar Vista. And she said that they had strict orders not to cross Lincoln Boulevard.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about you. You meet this lowrider. Mm-hmm. Very romantic. Mm-hmm. You two go to Inglewood.
No, we go to Fresno.
You moved to Fresno?
Yeah.
Did you want to move to Fresno?
Yeah, because I wanted to be an organizer for Cesar Chavez.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a socialist?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm a person who cares.
How old were you when you wanted to do this?
14. But now, going back to Venice, Venice was a hotbed of political activity at the time. I went to school with kids who had free Angela Davis buttons on.
Nice.
And Black Panthers, Brown Berets, several community centers.
Did you identify with any of these groups? Were you a member of any of these?
Not a member, but certainly identified as being Chicana. And the Chicano political movement was coming up at the time. And so when the Chicano Moratorium march happened on August 29th in 70, we had buses, community buses, that were going to take people to the demonstration.
Because I'm an ignorant Midwesterner who did not grow up around a lot of Latinos, Chicana means Mexican roots, but born in the USA.
Yes.
Great.
It's more political than, just identifying as Mexican American.
So Chicano means more than my grandma is from Texas.
Right.
It means I am liberal. I'm kind of like a Black Panther, but I'm brown instead of black.
No, Mexican American with a political awareness of your roots. I would put it that way.
Okay.
Of your roots in the United States, the political struggles here.
Fighting against the
oppression, racism.
There you go.
Yeah. The redlining. Why don't we have generational wealth?
Right.
And seeing those injustices.
And you learned this in school?
No.
Where'd you learn this?
On the street, my brother. On the street.
Who taught you on the street? These hippies?
Hippies. And also there were a big number of Chicana activists.
Oh, really?
In Venice. There were community centers. And there were a lot of publications like free presses. And I love to read. So I would read these newspapers, and I became politically aware.
At 14?
At 11, 10.
Were you also a good student in school? Were you studying there too?
Yeah, I was a good student. But when I was at Westminster in the 5th grade, a friend of mine, we had gotten a new teacher, Miss Newman, and she was teaching us. And I said, "Oh, Miss Newman, she's our new teacher. She's new to the school." And my friend Winnie, who's African American, said, she's not a good teacher. And I said, why? And she goes, they come here to be punished. Nobody wants to teach us.
Do you think that was true?
I don't think so, but I kind of gave up on school. By the time I'd reached junior high, the 7th grade, I wasn't doing homework. I wasn't, but I read a lot. And I was really curious all the time.
Well, I can't blame you. If right outside your door, there's all this excitement going on, this political stuff, drugs and sex and rock and roll, how do they expect a teenager to focus? Right?
Yeah, I guess, and then throw lowriders and cruising into the mix, I mean,
Okay, where'd you guys cruise?
oh, we would go up PCH to Temescal Canyon.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay, when I first moved here in the 80s, mid 80s, there was still cruising going on in Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, yeah. Well, we would go to Whittier Boulevard.
East LA.
East LA.
Right.
Those were the Sunday night cruises.
Yeah.
And
your mom was okay with all this?
no. That's why I left at 14.
Were you sneaking out at 13 to go and do this?
Yes.
And she had 3 other kids? So
Yeah.
she was busy?
She was busy, and I started making my own money babysitting and ironing for, the guys on the block, some friends. I knew how to do, the creases on the khakis really well, and the military pleats on the Pendletons. And
Okay, so again, I'm so happy to be talking with you today.
oh, you're welcome.
Because when we hear about groupies with Led Zeppelin, you bring up Led Zeppelin, with groupies with David Bowie, T-Rex, all these great stars of the late 60s, early 70s, and how they were with 14-year-old girls. They say, well, it was a different time. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that too, that you cruising at 13 in East LA, it's different than if we saw a 13-year-old today in a car? What's your take on that?
Probably, yeah. Because at 13, I came across some men that I should not have been with and didn't know that I was being exploited. I mean, not that I was, nothing serious, thank God.
Were these things happening to your friends, your best friends?
It did happen to them, yeah.
And so, did you guys talk about it and say this terrible thing happened, or boy, did I dodge a bullet with this one?
No. I mean, not that I know of, and with me, I was able to dodge that bullet. My best friend's mother, my Nina, I shared it with her. It's like, oh, Sammy from the meat market and I are talking on the phone. And she goes, how old is he? And he's got no business talking to you, kind of. And I was like, why? He's so nice and he's so cute, and she's like, no, he's got no business talking to you. And she must have told something to Sammy because he stopped talking to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So maybe the awareness wasn't there. I would probably say the awareness wasn't there.
Until you ended up in a sticky situation that you got out of.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got out of it, but nothing bad happened to me.
So why did you trust this 16-year-old boy with his Chevy Impala?
He was 17.
I think that's worse.
Yeah. No, I didn't think like a 14-year-old. Even when I was 11, I was hanging out with people 3 years older than me. And I guess my state of mind was just older.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was just a different time. And when I was 14, I would like to think that maybe I had the mind of a 20-year-old. Now reflecting back on it.
One of my earlier episodes in Hollywood was a man about your age who said who also lived in East LA at the time, who said he would go into Hollywood and go to the movie theaters, and in the back row were girls by themselves, and he would start talking to them, and they would just kind of make out in the back of the movie theater. And he too was like 14 or 15 years old. And it made me think, and now with your story, it made me think that young teens in LA were kind of grown up a little bit and doing stuff that those of us in the Midwest wouldn't do until we were in college.
Yeah. I think living here in the city, just you're exposed to more. And then also, too, I mean, in the 70s, it was like that free love kind of thing, I mean, I'd make out, but I was still a virgin when I left.
Yeah.
You
So the free love trickled down to elementary or middle school kids? Junior high school kids?
I would say so.
In that there was no
In
shame.
that,
So
yeah.
if you had made out with this meat market boy, nobody would tease you about it.
No, you still had to watch your reputation.
Oh.
Maybe that's a Mexican thing. Yeah. Maybe it was different for others, but I knew that my virginity was my ticket out.
So everything but.
Everything but. Or just about. I was still a good Catholic at the time.
And you were Catholic.
I'd go to confession on Saturday night.
What church were you going to?
St. Clement's.
In Venice.
In Venice.
Because I do see a lot of, I see some Jesuses, I see some Marys, I see a lot of Marys around here.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm not that I'm like super crazy religious. I've just inherited altars from loved ones, especially my mother-in-law.
It's very sweet.
And so when she passed away and they were clearing out the house and my sister-in-law passed away, it was about to get thrown out. And it's like, no, you can't do that,
Yeah.
And then the palm crosses were gifts.
Where's the palm crosses?
Across every doorway, it's supposed to protect the house.
Oh.
And so, a lot of them are gifts. And
Okay.
so it's not that I'm super crazy religious. But
I am. You
yeah.
can be.
And then you have to have the mandatory Last Supper near your dining room table.
Oh, is that the story?
Yeah. And
Because
so
I have a Last Supper. I need to put it by where I eat.
where you eat.
Okay.
Yeah, they always go in the dining room. And that one I got from the 99-cent store when I moved here. I said, oh, I need a Last Supper, So I found that at the 99-cent store.
I got mine in Tijuana.
Oh, see there? Yours is, you're OG.
Is it? You think so?
I guess so.
I think I'm just cheap. It was big and it was like $5.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I need this.
Yeah, and they get passed down.
Okay, this is a very ignorant question. When you went to Fresno, did you meet Cesar Chavez?
No. What ended up happening was my husband's family were migrant farm workers. And so when he discussed that he was going to be moving to Fresno the next morning, this was on a Friday night, he goes, I want you to come with me. I said, I can't go with you.
You guys were just dating at the time.
Yeah, we were dating. And he said,
You were like, I'm 14.
yeah. Well, I never felt 14. Never felt 14. I felt 17 and equal to him. And so I said, I've always wanted to. He goes, I could sell the lowrider and we could get a chopper and, be migrant farm workers and follow Cesar Chavez and organize for him. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a plan. And so we ended up moving to Lodi first. And then
Was your mom okay with all this?
no, no. And I told him my mom's going to get mad. She's but by that time, because I ran away with him, and I intended to stay with him forever. I mean, and if things went bad, it was like I knew I couldn't move back home because the guys knew that I was no longer, that I'd ran away with this guy, and making me an easier target, whatever. And, but, I knew about birth control and stuff because when I was 12, I worked for the Venice Free Clinic on a summer job where you were supposed to be 15 for the Summer Youth Employment Program. But I worked they placed me at the Venice Family Clinic or the Venice Free Clinic. And so I was working as an interpreter. And it was the prenatal clinic and the immunization clinic. And then in the evenings, which I rarely did, but I would if they needed somebody, sex clinic. People would go to get birth control. I knew about birth control because of the prenatal care. And
so you translated for
Spanish-speaking people and the staff. There was a couple of incidents that were really interesting. This is why I say by the time I was 12, I knew everything. I'd seen everything. There was a woman who had no Mexican immigrant who had no prenatal care and was coming in like in her last trimester. And she had gonorrhea. And so they asked for her husband to come in. And the only time that they could come in was after he got off work. And I was going to have to interpret. No, he had syphilis. And he did not tell his wife. And so I had to interpret this. And the man was very upset, grabbed his children and his wife and said that we were liars and stormed out of there. And so we never saw the lady again. And then we tried to do some follow-up visits, go to the house, and no one would answer. And another time, a lot of men were coming in with gonorrhea. And they were pinpointing it to a prostitute that lived off Abercrombie above a bar. Or near a bar. But if you see Abercrombie on the second floors, those used to be apartments. And so here I go, 12-year-olds, and I'm, going to find this prostitute that has been giving men in Venice gonorrhea. So I knew about birth control as a result of working at the clinic.
And hookers.
And hookers.
And that men would go to hookers.
Yeah.
And men would get embarrassed and angry if they were exposed as being
cheaters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get up to Lodi. We leave Saturday, so I don't have time to get birth control. And I thought the whole world is like Venice. You just walk into a clinic and you ask for birth control and they give it to you. You have your exam and that's it. And so there were no clinics in Lodi. And actually, we had been working out in the fields, and so we had the $40 to go pay a gynecologist for me to go get my birth control pills. They would not give them to me because I didn't have my mother with me. And so 2 months later, I was pregnant with my son.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Blessing? Blessing in disguise?
Yeah.
Silver lining?
Well, of course. Children are blessing.
Yeah.
He deserved a better mother, though. I mean, how can you be a mom at 15?
Is he in jail?
No.
Then you did a fine job.
Yeah, no.
You did a fine job.
Thank you.
And you tried.
Yeah, absolutely.
You tried.
You know,
So, okay, so you're 15 years old and you're a mom in Fresno.
in Fresno, and working out in the fields, and
What are you picking in the fields?
I'm chopping cotton, and
You were a cotton picker?
no chopping. By that time, they had machinery to pick cotton.
So the cotton machine picks it, and when you say chop,
Chopping cotton is when the plants are very small. They're maybe less than 4 inches, and you go with a hoe and make space. You go down these huge long rows, and you make space for the cotton to grow.
now people who might not be Californians who are listening to this, of which there are a lot,
Oh, good.
Fresno can get very hot
Oh, and it can get very cold.
and cold. In fact, one of the Huell Hauser episodes, Huell is obviously a huge influence on this podcast, talked about how there were caves in Fresno for the natives
Oh, wow.
to chill out in during the summer when it was too hot to be outside.
Wow, they were smarter than us.
So my question is, were you out there in the sweltering heat?
Yeah. Yeah, that's when the harvests start coming in. That's when you start picking tomatoes and grapes. And the grapes that are picked out there are some for wine, but the majority of it is for raisins. And I did not know that raisins come from grapes until I got to Fresno.
I think a lot of people are just learning this.
Well, there you go. You get a lesson today.
So you're out there doing real manual labor
Oh, yeah.
while you were pregnant, and then once after you were a mom, you're back out there because that's your job, right?
Yeah. No, I was not out in the fields when I was pregnant with Mike.
Good.
Mike worked, my husband, Mike, worked at a foundry. And we were, we were doing all right. And I wanted to go work out in the fields because I wanted my own money.
Right.
And I was always used to having my own money or contributing And so my mother-in-law was still working out in the fields, and I went to work with her. And so we started chopping cotton. And then, once the cosecha comes in, the harvest, then you're picking cucumbers, all of that. And then the last time that I stepped foot into a field I was 9 months pregnant with Brooke. It was about 3 weeks before I gave birth. And at that point, I swore I was never going to do this again.
Because it's really hard and
It's hot.
it's hot.
It's,
Approximately what year is this?
I was 22, so 81?
How much do you, if you
No,
remember,
70. I don't know.
late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah.
How much would a farm worker make in a day doing this kind of work?
Back then, if you made, I think when I first started, we made like $22 a day in the 70s.
Was it based on the weight of the product that you were bringing in, or they just work you and everybody gets $22 at the end of the day?
With chopping cotton, it was paid hourly. It was like by the day. A lot of it, when you're picking vegetables, is done by the bucket. And you get a little card, and every time you fill it up with tomatoes, and then you walk it over, and they're putting it into these huge trucks, and they stamp your card or put a hole in your card.
Were you really good? Did you have more buckets than other people?
I was average.
Were you amazed by the people who could do it really fast?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. And then I'm kind of small, and and so carrying a big bucket, you're talking about maybe 15 pounds, 10 pounds of tomatoes, and when having to walk them over to the truck across rows. The worst job the worst, absolute worst, was picking onions, because a truck goes in ahead of you the day before, and it digs up the onions, and it also runs over onions. You get out there in 112, 113 degrees. The smell of rotten onions is everywhere. And you get paid by the sack. You got to fill up this burlap sack that's 50 pounds. Wow. And that's maybe $10.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Wow.
and that stench stays with you for days.
So, do you have a heightened appreciation for the fruits and vegetables that end up on your table now?
Oh, yeah.
Should all of us?
Absolutely.
Should we all think that none of these onions got here by magic? That
Yeah,
they
no.
went through what you had to go through?
Yeah. I mean, people are still out there. I mean, just because I left doesn't mean that, I mean, I can see it now. I mean, people working so fast and so hard because, they're getting paid by the piece. It isn't an hourly wage. And, and sometimes, it gets really cold out there. Down south, Calexico, that area, asparagus, broccoli, cabbage. That comes in during the winter time. And it's wet, it's foggy, it's cold. And my mother-in-law, my God, that woman was a saint. She had 8 kids, and she would be out there because she had to, pregnant, and a lot of people don't have that choice or that benefit.
You're tearing up a little bit. Is it because you're thinking of her and women like her?
Yeah, and that it still exists today.
Mm-hmm.
There's still, I mean, summertime was nice because there was work and you had money in Fresno. People were going to the park, enjoying themselves. Winters were harsh because there wasn't work, and, so, yeah, you're eating a lot of top ramen.
The stories you've told me already are just fascinating, and I've not seen these in movies. You're a playwright. Hopefully you've written some of these down as plays.
Bits of it creep in,
Okay, so also I'm black, and one of my first apartments was in Inglewood in the 80s.
Okay.
And one of the things that my black neighbors told me not to do was to go to Boyle Heights or to East LA, because back then black and brown people were, not people, but gangs were fighting each other. And they said it was dangerous to go over there. And so I didn't really discover any of that side of town until probably the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was shocked at how close it was to me in Hollywood. You just go right down Sunset, and it turns into Cesar Chavez. Your man got a street named after him. And I never knew much about tamales or just a lot of the foods that I love.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit ripped off by that really bad advice that I got.
Well, back in the 80s, it was probably good advice.
You think so?
Yeah, because everybody was shooting at each other around here in the 80s.
Okay.
In the 90s, too. And thank God it's slowed down quiet a bit. But, yeah, Boyle Heights to me was almost like first of all, there's a lot of people from El Paso in Boyle Heights.
Huh.
All it takes is one cousin. Come over here.
Well, Well, and that
You
makes
know?
sense. Why
Yeah.
why be in Silver Lake if your cousins are
In
down the
Boyle
road?
Heights, yeah. And it's a migration, I think, that's been going on since the 30s or the 40s.
Also, it's close to the train station and the bus station.
Right. Well, a lot of people that ended up in Boyle Heights, from my understanding, is people who were laying down track for the railroad.
Oh.
Oh,
That makes sense.
right? You know,
I thought those were Chinese people though.
no, there were Mexicanos also.
How about that?
Yeah, my mother-in-law's mother, her uncle, started laying track around Chihuahua. They lived in El Paso, and they ended up in Oxnard because of the train tracks.
So how did you make your way to Boyle Heights?
I'd been writing since I was a kid. And I met someone who introduced me to writers who had been journalists and suggested that maybe I start working as a journalist to hone my writing skills. And I was working at a credit union at the time with a terrible boss that screamed. And she yelled at me one day, and I said, screw this, I've had it. I got the yellow pages out, and I started looking at newspapers. And I called a newspaper in it just happened to be in Boyle Heights, the East Side Journal, Belvedere Citizen. And I spoke with the general manager. His name's Corky Perez, was a labor union organizer, knew everybody in Boyle Heights. And he told me to come on down for an interview.
What a time!
Yeah. But by that time,
Wait, though. You just picked up the yellow pages, dialed the number, Corky picks up and says, come on down.
yeah.
That doesn't happen today, you know.
Yeah. No. Well, also, too, is that I'd already had published some articles. There was the very first one that I published was with the Venice Beachhead.
Yes.
And and then I published a few others, and then hounded Lowrider magazine, like, I want to do articles for you. I want to do articles for you. And my very first story with them ended up being a cover story, and it was interviewing Paul Rodriguez, the comedian.
What year was this?
The early 80s, mid 80s. Yeah.
You did a cover story for Lowrider magazine.
Yeah. And I became a regular, a freelancer with them. That was my first paid article. It was $50.
Wow.
And so I had sent my clippings to Corky. And so when I met with him, he said, we want to start an entertainment section. And the newspaper was the Belvedere Citizen East Side Journal, community newspaper, very well respected, and their offices were right on First and Dittman in Boyle Heights. And he said, but I can't hire you as a journalist. I want to hire you as a salesperson, sell advertising, and then you can write whatever you want. You'll have an entertainment section. And so that was such a huge blessing for me, because during this time there's a Chicano art renaissance going on. And news was coming to me about the Chicano punk bands, art shows, and so I started to meet some of these artists and became friends with them and create a community. And some of their artwork is here. There's Gronk. That was a beautiful gift of Tormenta that he gave me a long time ago. And
This reminds me of Breakfast at Tiffany's a little bit.
yeah, Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Tormenta you always see the back of her. You never see the front, because she has she's turned away from the world.
Oh.
And so that's an ongoing figure for him, a symbol.
He's a Chicano artist?
He's known as Gronk.
Okay.
His name is Glugio Grunk Nicrando. He grew up in Boyle Heights or East LA and went to Garfield High, where his art teacher told him that he was never going to amount to anything and to forget the writing.
Isn't that the best when they do that?
Yeah.
Because it's the greatest blessing you'll ever get.
Yeah, and he's the only Chicano artist who has had a solo show at LACMA. Yeah.
Why just him?
Why? Right?
No disrespect to him, but
Why? Exactly.
Do you need to
I'm
be?
sick and tired of it.
Do you need to be a guest curator for LACMA when they reopen?
No, it depends on who's on their board.
You wouldn't even accept it if it's not presented properly.
I don't know. So at this point, when I'm at the newspaper, art collectors have started collecting Chicano art. There's a renaissance, an arts renaissance, and then you got the Chicano punk movement. You got Los Lobos coming out, and
Were you a huge fan of Los Lobos?
I was. Yeah, I wasn't aware of them. And then their publicist reached out to me and said, they're coming out with their second album. And
second album, was that the Wolf? How Will the Wolf Survive?
Yeah, How the Wolf Will Survive. So I had a copy of the cassette before anybody else did. Yeah, and then I went to see them
too.
Oh, it's a great album. I love it.
And it's funny because they did hang out with the punks.
Yeah,
like X and the Blasters.
Yeah,
but they weren't punk.
No.
Which was so sweet about them. They have like this very gentle, romantic style, this traditional style, but they're their own thing.
No, they're a band from East LA.
That's right.
They did their covers and they did their own original work. I got to see them live for the very first time at the Anti Club.
I'd been there on Melrose.
Yeah. And
rest in peace, Anti Club.
Yeah.
Well, and that part of Melrose, because when I saw a band there that was like Melrose, I was like, oh, I love Melrose. And I was living on the west side. You had to just keep going east. Mm-hmm. And then it got scary, and you had to keep going east. And then finally you made it to the Anti-Club, and I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, no, it was the Blasters and Los Lobos. And
great show.
So I'm seeing them, and I'm wondering, how's this crowd going to, and, a bunch of punks with like crazy blue hair and mohawks and what have you, dancing to rancheras.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like, I love this.
Okay, again, this is what makes LA so beautiful.
Right?
Like, so beautiful.
Yes.
Because I don't think this is happening in New York City or San Francisco even.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
And then we've got the best Mexican food too. But so I worked for the newspaper for about 3 years and was also a freelance writer. Majority of, I would say covering Chicano Latino arts and culture.
Yes.
And then I just couldn't keep that up, and a day job and raising 2 kids at the same time. So my writing career kind of took put it on the back burner. Mm-hmm. And would still do poetry readings every once in a while, but wasn't publishing work. And then once the kids kind of got grown and did their own thing, then I joined. A friend of mine was teaching a class on how to develop the solo show. That's how I got introduced to theater. And then I found out about Casa 0101 in Boyle Heights, who had playwriting classes. And I started taking playwriting classes there. And its founder, Josefina Lopez, I had written I was with another theater company before that, Tierra, and I was performing my one-woman show with them called Venice Black and Brown at the time. And now I've called it, I've done it a couple of other times, and it's called Black, Brown, and Bruised. And it's about growing up in Venice and seeing the gentrification, the crack epidemic, guns, all of that. But also the sweet side of growing up with hippies and, Black Panthers and all of that.
So you're writing,
Yes, I go
you're
back.
editing, you're selling ads, you're raising kids. Were you always a performer at heart too, or was that a stretch for you?
That was a stretch. What happened was there was this time period where I wasn't writing anymore. I mean, and not professionally at least. I was still doing poetry readings every once in a while, but I was now working for the city of Santa Monica. Had the nice cushy job with the pension. Brooke had moved out. Michael was already out on his own. My son had been out on his own for
It's funny,
quite some
you
time.
didn't smile brightly when you said you had a cushy job with Santa Monica. Did you consider that like a sellout job?
No, not at all.
All right,
My
good.
God, no.
What was the
no,
title?
I was the receptionist for City Hall. So I was the voice and the face of Santa Monica. And I was so proud.
What years were this?
This was 1999 till I was offered a retirement deal during the pandemic or at the beginning of the pandemic.
So until recently.
Yeah. So I worked with them for 22 years. I don't know, 20-something
Wow.
years.
Okay. Strange that I know this, but the city of Santa Monica had a black female police chief
Yeah.
who came from Inglewood.
Jackie. I love Jackie.
But I
Jackie
feel like,
Seabrooks.
I feel like she just kind of came and went. I saw her a few times doing press conferences. I think there was some murder near SMC or whatever, like some nasty stuff. Mm-hmm. And she was fantastic.
Oh, she was wonderful. Last I heard from her, I think she was going to start law school. She's relocated to Dallas. She was amazing. She was wonderful.
Interesting.
Yeah, I loved Jackie.
Maybe what it was she was the chief of police in Santa Monica, and then Inglewood wanted her as chief. One of the two happened. Like she switched.
Yeah, no, she was a captain
Right.
with Santa Monica, became the chief of police at Inglewood.
That's right.
And then came back to Santa Monica as the chief.
Exactly.
Yeah, you should have seen her send off. It was so cool. They have an old like 1960s, 50s black and white that they use for parades, and she was driven in the back seat and sent,
Okay, so we've just lost all of our anti-fascists who were in love with you minutes ago when you were pro Chicana and all that. Now you're hanging out with cops. You're part of the government.
Well, you have to be.
You have to?
No,
Is that the best place to make change is from within?
Sometimes. I think it takes both. It really does take both. I remember a young Chicana who was in college, and her partner was majoring in social studies and social justice kind of stuff, right? And I asked her, well, what's your major? She goes, business. And she said it kind of like, and I said, no, we need us everywhere.
Yes.
We need us everywhere.
Yes.
We need cops in our that are going to approach a backyard party and know that it's cool.
Right.
Just because people are black and brown, that not everybody's going to be friggin' packing, or that, somebody's not going to get shot. Mm-hmm. That can, pinpoint the identifiers. So, yeah, we need us everywhere. And I was really proud to work for the city of Santa Monica. And considering that I grew up in the area, and this one thing my mom did, I owe the job to my mother. Because when I was growing up, before I left to Fresno, and she would find out that I was ditching or misbehaving, she would plead with me. Please, Lindsey, at least get your high school diploma so you could get a job at the city, meaning the city of Santa Monica. And so she got to see it before she passed away.
How fantastic.
Yeah. And so I'm working for the city of Santa Monica, living in Inglewood now because I got gentrified out of Venice. And I would say, like, is this it? Like, what do I do now? And my mom had passed away. I remarried, and my husband passed away. And I think going through like a low level depression. No, let's call it what it is. I was depressed. And at that time, I couldn't drive long distances or get on the freeway because of anxiety. It's something I didn't experience before. And so I took the bus to go see Lily Tomlin's solo show at the Amundsen. And so I'm sitting in the audience, and I'd always gone to plays. And the lights go off, and they come back on, and she's walking on stage. And God spoke to my heart and said, do this. And I went, what? No. So the bus ride home, I'm thinking, how do you do this? Do you take acting first? Do you write? What? Turns out a couple days later, I find out that a friend who is a performance artist and a writer for theater now has a class with the city of Santa Monica that she's gotten a grant for at Highways and on teaching women how to develop the solo show and write for theater. And somebody has just dropped out, and there's room for me. And there I go.
You're a religious person.
Yeah.
Do you think God is looking out for me right now?
For you, for everyone.
No, in that situation where you see Lily Tomlin, you feel it,
Mm-hmm.
and then all these other miraculous steps happen.
Well, yeah,
How do you explain it?
God.
You do explain it that way.
Yeah. Well, I remember being back at the Eastside Journal Belvedere Citizen. Now, let's take into account that I dropped out of school in the 8th grade. My formal education ended there. I'm covering plays and going to like the Mark Taper and stuff, things I couldn't necessarily afford before or at that time, going on press passes. And I remember going to see In the Belly of the Beast at the Mark Taper. And at that point, not being a religious person, actually having had an argument with God and not believing in him for 10 years. And so this during that time. And I knew it was God speaking to me. But he said, this is your classroom. Learn. Not knowing that 30 years later, I would be taking writing courses, playwriting courses at Casa 0101. A playhouse, a theater that was opened by Josefina Lopez, who grew up in the area and saw the necessity of having Latino and Latina and Chicano-Chicana stories on stage. Mm-hmm. She knew the importance of that and made room for me. So I had previously written a short play when I was with Tierra called Favorite Cousins. It was maybe 40 minutes long. And one of the actresses, Raquel Salinas, had told me, give it to her. And I was like, no. So I went ahead and I did that. Josefina read it. And she said, your play's too short to produce by itself. But I'm going to choose, she had already given me another idea for a short play. And I had written it about old cholas, being stuck at a senior facility and having beef and fighting with each other with their walkers and canes. So I'd written another short play based on her idea, and I named it Pleito. And she goes, we're going to take your 2 short plays. I'll select about 2 or 3 others, and we're going to produce a short play festival called Chicanas, Cholas y Chisme. And you're going to produce it. I go, I don't know nothing about producing. And she's like, no, I'm going to get you together with Claudia Duran, who's been teaching directing at casa. She knows how to produce. The two of you will produce it. And so Chicanas, Cholas y Chisme is now in its 11th season.
Yes.
Yes.
And we can see it.
March. It opens March 10th at Casa 0101, Friday and Saturday, 8 p.m., and Sundays at 3. And it runs for 4 weekends.
This is
and
fantastic.
We have it every March for Women's History Month. And so Claudia and I became producing partners, and I produced it with Claudia for the first 6 years. I took a couple years break, and now I'm back for the second year, for the last 2 years.
Well, this is fantastic. I'm so glad I talked to you now because we can hype it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Because this is going to come out in about a week.
Oh, good.
So this will give people time.
Well, Chicanas, Cholas y Chisme, being the dream child of Josefina, was that it's an entirely Latina-driven production. The playwrights, they're 10-minute pieces, and they're written by Latinas, directed by Latinas, and we teach all of the women how to produce a show, so all of the women are associate producers. And we have staged maybe going on 160 new works.
Wow.
Yeah. And also taken a shorter version of that to the New Orleans In Fringe Festival.
How about that?
Yeah. And to Santa Cruz and to San Diego and Tijuana.
Okay, I'm going to ask the most basic question now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I want to make a whole evening out of watching these short plays in Boyle Heights. Where should I eat first?
Well, there's Alan B's across the street.
Home of the famous bean and cheese burrito.
Right. But there's also Casa Fina. Casa Fina is on Breed, closer to Mariachi Plaza.
Okay.
And it is owned by Josefina and Emmanuel,
What?
her husband. Yeah.
What's good there?
Everything.
Obviously, but what
Everything.
do you eat there?
Their chicken soup. Their chicken soup is so good.
I'm so glad you said that. I would never order chicken soup.
Yeah, and they have homemade corn tortillas. And I ask for their spicy chile, their salsa. Very good. Their sopes are really good. Carne asada, carnitas are to die for. And then it's a full bar. And on your Sunday matinees, there's a mariachi brunch that you could start off with. I know they have mariachis. So you can have mariachis, get your little paloma, your margarita, your menudo, and then stroll over to the theater and have a wonderful evening.
And if you're going to be drinking, you can take the Gold Line.
Yeah, the Gold Line's right there.
Right there.
Yeah. Well, that short play that I gave to Josefina and was the spin-off to Chicanas, Cholas y Chisme is a full-length play now, and it is going to be produced and staged at Casa 0101 in April. So this is the world premiere of my full-length play, Favorite Cousins, opening on April the 28th and running to May 19th, my very first.
Fantastic.
I know.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me into your beautiful home. I'm glad we did not do it in the patio.
Yeah, right? I'm glad I swept. I was almost about to say, well, the day's nice. Let's go outside.
I almost said that too as you were showing me around.
I know. It's like, this is normally like where my clothes rack, but don't look in the closet.
It's a beautiful place.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.
How great was Lindsey? You know who we'd eat bean and cheese burritos with in Boyle Heights? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, Tony, Jordan, have a slice of pizza on Venice Beach on us. So shout out to our Patreons, Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Grinke, Ben Welch, Jen Adams, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, Christina Up North, Robin Carey, Adam Shorn, Ben from Down Under, and Chris from the ATX. To be a Patreon, go to patreon.com/hereinla and give till it hurts. Also, shout out to our Angelinos. To be an Angelino, all you have to do is PayPal us or Venmo, $25 or more, and we will list you on the Here in LA website or Medium blog forever. Just send your hard-earned cash to busblog@gmail.com on PayPal or Venmo. It's just busblog. Want to support us, but you bet your best friend it would never snow in LA? No problem. You can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook. Oh my God, post 2. I have not seen very many people post 2. Be a post-tour. You can even tweet something nice about this. Anytime you see me tweet about an episode, retweet it. And for God's sake, tell your friends. Tell them that tell them how Here in LA is spelled, and that it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and even Amazon. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who's probably played with a few members of Los Lobos, Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and music supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Orgone and Jordan Katz. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and farm workers everywhere, doing what they can for their families in the worst conditions, like the severe weather we're having right now, just to put food on your table. Thank you for all you do.